We all eat. We all have to thrive. We all literally can only survive if of course, our planet is healthy, or if our food is clean and healthy. But we can't really say that it's always healthy, because climate change is upon us. So let's jump straight into the essence of CGIAR. I know that the organization has deep experience building agricultural research ecosystems. But, you know, AI has come up, and this conversation is all about AI. How are you leveraging AI and deep tech to accelerate breakthroughs in climate-resilient crops and food systems? Ram, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anita. Let me just add a slightly another dimension to this. So, you know, agriculture is quite interesting. On one hand, agri-food systems, they are impacted negatively by climate change. At the same time, agri-food systems also contribute to climate change. You see where we are going with this, yeah?
Wait, hang on a second. Say that again.
Okay.
They are impacted by climate change, but at the same time, they impact.
Yeah, they are also cause of climate change.
They're also the cause.
Exactly.
Explain that.
Yeah. Okay, just to give you an example. Suppose, you know, it's not as if agriculture is completely nature positive. Like when you grow an acre of rice, say, right? You consume a lot of water, right? You apply fertilizer. Fertilizer, when you apply on a flooded field of paddy, gives out a lot of you know, CH4 emissions, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, I mean, this is the statistic. I don't have it at the top of my number. The agri-food systems are attributed to cause about 25 to 28% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, right? So so not only is agriculture sort of contributing to climate change, but agriculture also is impacted by climate change. So it's like a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, the opportunity for AI and deep tech is this, right? On one hand, agri-food systems are an important source of livelihood for huge amounts of population in the global south, right? So you can't just decide one day that, you know, agriculture is causing climate change, so therefore I'll not do agriculture, because there are people dependent on it for their livelihood, and more importantly, there are populations like us dependent on the food, the output that comes from that, right? At the same time, we also know that climate change is increasingly making agriculture a very risky craft, so to say, right? So you also need climate smart crops as well as climate smart agricultural practices, so that some of the agricultural food systems or the agricultural livelihoods are protected or resilient to the climate change, right? So that then becomes a very interesting problem with very different competing priorities, right? So this is where artificial intelligence, deep tech can play a transformative role. So what, like, you know, agriculture, agri-food systems as a sector generates a lot of data, right? But the problem is there is data that comes from the farm, right? About, you know, when the farmer has sown, what is the stage of the crop. Then there is data from the environment, because fundamentally a farmer grows his or her crop on a piece of land. And that land, the biggest asset for a farmer is the environment, the soil, the climate, right? So there is a lot of data that the climate and the environment generates. And then fundamentally, if you think about it, what does a farmer do? He or she uses his or her resources, converts a seed into a grain, and that grain basically then gets traded into a market, and from the market it goes through multiple intermediaries, and finally it comes onto your plate, right? Yeah. So there is so much that happens between the farmer and what gets consumed on your plate, which means there is so much of data that you basically are generating, right? Now, to sort of come up with those those pathways to transition agri-food systems to a point where they are protecting the livelihoods and the food security, but at the same time, they are minimalizing their environmental footprint, requires a lot of system thinking and modeling. This sort of very complex modeling of multi-dimensional, multi-time scale horizons isn't possible in a human way. That's where you need cutting-edge capabilities of AI, deep tech to sort of model these complex scenarios and sort of really help our policymakers to identify those policy interventions which lead to equitable outcomes. If you give me a minute, I'll also tell you how sometimes inadvertent policy decisions, sometimes when policy decisions lead to inadvertent outcomes, right? I come from India, okay? India is a country where from the 1980s onwards, to sort of address our issues of food insecurity, we promoted a lot of cultivation of rice and wheat, right? Fast forward 30, 40 years today, we are surplus in terms of wheat and rice, but there are other sorts of perverse outcomes that we are experiencing. Like, we consume so much of these rice and wheat that today we are beginning to see some health implications in the form of type 2 diabetes, right? And secondly, paddy is a very water intensive crop, and sometimes paddy is also grown in places which are not ecologically suitable for paddy cultivation. All this can be somehow linked to some of the policy interventions that the government at that point sort of rolled out in the right spirit. But it is these kinds of complex modeling scenarios that AI and deep tech can sort of help us address.
I'm listening, and I like that you kind of bring the Indian dimension, because it just helps us to see where and how we may want to replicate or where we do not want to copy. Bringing it to the concept of hopefully being able to project Africa as an agricultural powerhouse, if I may put it that way. How do you balance the need for scalable innovation with local relevance, especially when introducing AI-powered tools in diverse agroecological contexts?
No, absolutely. You see, we create all these fantastic tools and technologies in our labs, right? Ultimately, the adoption and the consequent impact that can be created through these tools only happens when you are able to localize a tool or an app for the local context. And this is where I'd also like to refer to one of the programs that CGR runs. It's called Accelerate for Impact Platform. In fact, if you are more interested, you can also check them out in the booth. Yeah. So what these guys do is they really try to link up global science with the local context, right? So the local context represented through local entrepreneurs who are very well aware of the local context and the problem, but looking for some cues from the global science to sort of then package a solution that really is a fit for purpose in the local context. Probably a classical example for me to refer to is, I think the A4IP ran a challenge program called AgriTech for Morocco, and there was a startup called PCS Agri, which also coincidentally has a small booth outside. You will see that how some of these innovations that are embedded within these local startups can actually benefit, have still found a way to contextualize global solutions, but then it'll not happen on its own. That's where you need some sort of an institutional frameworks or programs like A4IP to sort of facilitate that process.
Speaking of which, do we have any agri-tech startups in the house? Anybody in agriculture? Anybody pursuing? Yeah, okay, we've got one or two. Now, I'm eager, particularly because in your profile, I know that you've dabbled in both private and public sector, and I just want to kind of go off the cuff here. With this burgeoning movement of African startups now pursuing agri-tech, etc., where do we find our true power? Where do we find empowerment, if you want to call it that? How does private sector and public sector, either together or individually, come to encourage this movement of startups?
Again, a great point. So, I generally like speaking in terms of analogies. So allow me to use an analogy here.
By all means.
Yeah. So, this is my classic example. You take public infrastructure as an analogy. You have the road outside, right? The road is generally built by public sector, like a municipality or the government, right? But the cars that ply on those roads are actually built by private sector. The theory is the public sector should be creating foundational infrastructure, right? And ensure that that foundational infrastructure is equitably accessible to everyone, right? Yeah. But to solve the actual real world problems, the individual problems that people will have, perhaps the public sector has huge responsibilities and they do not have sufficient attention span to really carve out the specific customer personas and then start going about figuring out a problem in a way that it becomes a sustainable business. That drive is better with a private sector entrepreneur, right? If you take the same analogy and apply it to something like a digital agriculture, personally, I think public sector should be investing in foundational infrastructure like internet connectivity, telephone connectivity, ensure that mobile data is accessible, right? Or maybe I know a lot of startups look for a lot of data, right? So maybe that's the role of the public sector, creating those digital public goods. The private sector, they are probably better, have a greater comparative advantage at identifying a problem, using some of this available publicly funded resources, creating fit for purpose solutions and creating sustainable business models out of it, right? Now, will this happen automatically? Will it happen organically? The answer is a big no. It hasn't happened in the West. It certainly, I don't think, will happen in the global South, right? So that's where I think as ecosystem builders, perhaps someone like a UM6P or someone like a CGIR, as someone like an ecosystem builders, we are sort of the bridge, right? We need to sort of bring about that sort of very futuristic thinking in terms of, okay, what is it that we as the ecosystem builders need to do and invest in, which then brings this public sector and private sector intersection, not in a very supply driven way, but it happens in a very organic way, right? So you can use instruments like incubators. So how do you bring incubators? How do you do some policy dialogues so that you bring a meeting of the minds of the public and private sector, so on and so forth, if you know, if you know what I'm sort of alluding to.
I know exactly what you're talking about, Ram, and I'm going to put you on the spot once again, only because you so effortlessly and beautifully, described the value chain of the farmer to the plate. Now let's go and talk about the farmers, because obviously we cannot, pretend we exist in a bubble. They are also important. What would be our role in involving the farmers who, if I understand what you said, are actually the beginning of this process, if that makes sense. We're talking about DeepTech, and with all due respect, at the end of the day, how does it translate to the farmer?
Absolutely, yeah. No, again, a brilliant question. You see, again, sorry to, so, I always was inspired by this quote from the founder of Wade, a startup. He says, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Even we might be speaking all this fancy AI deep tech. I understand it's a great new capability, a new frontier for the human imagination today, right? But we shouldn't be working in a way that we are trying to find a problem in search of we should be searching for a solution for a problem, not the other way around, right? So personally, I think a great startup which really can create an impact will be something that starts with the farmer first. Like if you look at the founder profiles of most of the AgriTech startups, these are mostly people who grew up in urban areas, had a tech career, now look at, okay, agriculture is looking interesting, so you start dabbling with it. I've never seen a farmer saying that, okay, this is my life. Yeah. I know that's something in technology. Can I take this opportunity and create a business out of it? Unless and until you see more of this grassroots and bottoms up digital enabled innovations, I think we'll continue to struggle with this situation where you have a great beautiful startup, great technology, product looks good, but somehow when it hits the ground, you never will find that it's either not sustainable or perennially dependent on philanthropic funding just to keep the lights going, right? Yeah. So somewhere something fundamentally has to change, and perhaps I'm myself lost for answers, like what is it that we need to do to sort of flip that innovation process? How can we make farmer more central to that innovation development process? So farmers shouldn't be sort of at the end of that beta testing of your product. The problem articulation has to start with the problem. And for that, sometimes it's necessary that some of these farmers, progressive farmers, themselves become sort of AgriTech founders with some tech people from the tech industry.
One of the things I'm most attracted to your, of course, your portfolio is having a good sense of what's happening in Asia. And now, living in Nairobi, Kenya, now beginning to also have a good sense of what's happening in Africa. Ram, where do we borrow Asia's blueprint?
Okay, as far as digital innovations goes, I suppose. Of course. Okay. See, I think what Asia has done well, especially the public sector in Asia has done well, is, they have these digital infrastructures like mobile data, the telecom connectivity. The governments, I think, have done a fantastic job of crowding in a lot of private investment and ensuring that some of these, foundational infrastructure becomes very, very affordable. Perhaps that's where in Africa I still do feel that things like mobile internet, mobile calls, etc., are slightly more expensive. I think probably that is something that if you fundamentally bring down the cost of the foundational infrastructure, I think you will see organically that more innovators will try and create affordable innovations. Right now, the cost, the entry barriers in Africa are slightly on the higher side. Therefore, naturally, the innovations that come out also are catered to a small section of farmers who can afford those innovations. But I think we need to bring the cost of our foundational infrastructure on the lower side. And apart from that, of course, I think Asia and Africa have a lot of commonalities in terms of our characteristics, like 80% of smallholders in India are smallholders. That's the case in Africa. We have very similar agroclimatic zones. So there's a lot of learning that we can learn from each other. But fundamentally, I think one thing probably Asia has done slightly better is we've brought the cost of our foundational infrastructure much better. I think that is a real innovation that's probably needed more in Africa.
Ram, we go to talk about international partnerships, right? I mean, you walk out into the displays and you see all these people easily over 50 nationalities here at UM6P for the DeepTech Summit. We're all looking for the opportunities to collaborate. We're all looking for some kind of investment, etc. But let's really focus on the role of international partnerships in ensuring that deep tech solutions are inclusive, equitable, and driven by the needs of smallholder farmers. How do we pursue this role? How are we able to identify, even the right partnerships? Because we also have a lot of startups here. How do we find those partnerships and identify them?
Yeah. I mean, that's again, you need a lot of intermediaries to sort of facilitate this process. So you need platforms, like I think DeepTech is a fantastic platform. So you need these sorts of networking partnerships for you to sort of potentially understand what's happening in the other countries. But beyond that, organizations like CGIAR, or for that matter, even A4IP again, we are sort of positioning ourselves as some sort of a clearinghouse, right? So we are the people, as fortunately for us, we as an organization, we have our network all across the global south. We have our networks in Asia, Southeast Asia. We have our networks in India, now in Africa, West Africa, and including in some locations in the global north. So we do have a comparative advantage. So through our network, we are positioning ourselves as some sort of a not-for-profit clearinghouse with the knowledge bank or the knowledge base of what's happening globally. And because we are, by our DNA, a research organization, we just don't sort of create all those case studies. We also will make an effort to collect the data, build evidence on the relevance of these case studies. So then going forward, like a startup in Morocco has, say, a great technology, perhaps they are thinking that, okay, my technology is probably relevant somewhere in Laos, but who do I reach out to? How do I reach out there? I mean, that is where someone like a CGIAR could be a potential entry point into some of those alternate geographies. Not only will we potentially help you find some of those local networks there, but we can also sort of help you using our own scientific depth. We can also help you sort of unpack your idea a bit more, evaluate your idea a bit more, and also help you really evaluate whether your solution is really fit for purpose in the geographies that you're considering.
Beautiful. I'm not going to release you just yet. Do we have any questions from the audience? Any questions at all for Ram on this topic of deep tech in agriculture on the continent? Anybody at all? Counting down. Okay. Can we kindly have a microphone to the gentleman? A little bit of light in the audience so we can see his face. And kindly mention your name, where you're from, what you're working on, and before you go to the question for Ram. So a little bit of light for the audience so I can see the wonderful face of the person who is going to make that contribution. Charlotte, are you going to come for a microphone for me? Thank you so much. A round of applause for Charlotte, helping us, please.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I really appreciate it. So there's a gentleman. Please keep your hand up for us. So Ram, I'm very eager also, eventually when we finish off, your thoughts on why this conversation is crucial, now, after the intervention from the floor. Can we have some lights in the audience, please? Can we have some lights so we can see him? Some lights, please. Un peu de lumière, s'il vous plaît.
Hello, my name is Obiabuchi Nana. I'm from Nigeria.
Please, could you please stand up for us kindly so that our audience can see who is speaking? Thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
Okay, my name is Obiabuchi and I'm from Nigeria. and I'm currently working on how to use natural language processing to enhance portfolio management. So you talked about inclusive deep tech, and I understand to build a tailored solution, a deep tech solution for Africa, we need data, and AI is as good as the data you put in it, okay? So is there any, in your organization, do you have a way of having an open source data that people can have access to build solutions that are tailored to farmers within the African concept?
Thank you so much. Wonderful question. Please go ahead, Ram. You can go ahead.
A great question. So you're absolutely right. So, CGIAR, by our definition, we are meant to, so all our data is by definition meant to be open source. So most of our data should be available. But we as an organization in the 40 years, have we done a good job of managing the data and maintaining the data and putting the data out there in a way so that it is AI ready and useful to entrepreneurs like you? Probably that is where we are also, one of my tasks as an interim director for the digital transformation is to really help the organization package our legacy data as well as put in place systems so that all the data that we are collecting in the course of our work becomes AI ready, right? So we are in the process of doing it. But, I'd just like to give you some clue, right? So this is going to be a challenge for African challenges, especially for natural language processing, where you need a lot of training data to build language models that speak the African lingo, right?
Bingo. Yeah.
This is going to be a challenge, but I can give you an example. Like what India did was, in India, Government of India has a project called Bhashini, wherein today it's able to handle about 13 or 14 of the Indian languages. Now, collecting the data on these 13 or 14 languages is a challenge. So Government of India used a very innovative citizen science approach. That is, they found citizen volunteers who were then basically taken through a process wherein the citizen volunteers were sort of speaking, providing a lot of their data, which then became a basis for training a language model. So I think in Africa also somehow, if we have to crack this problem of collecting data for the African languages, there's no other way but we need to start engaging citizens in the science process. So the citizen science, I think, is going to be that magic wand, which will really help us bridge that data gap for Africa.
Such a powerful question. Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions for Ram? Anybody else with any questions at all? All right. So no, but I do believe that this whole thing of data is so crucial. And of course, Africa is 54, 55 countries. Within the country, about 100 different dialects. So of course, that data and how we collect it, in which language it's best understood, will be a challenge that we probably have to pursue. Ram, as you take leave of us, as I asked before, your last words, why is this conversation crucial and critical at this time for the continent of Africa?
Well, I think what we are just experiencing is just a teaser. There's a lot to come. And if we don't put the right guardrails, right policies, right strategies in place, I'm afraid we will go into a world which we might not like. So now is the time. Now is not the time just to meet, but now is the time to decide and take concrete actions so that the world where generative AI becomes like very, very normal isn't a world where it leads to a lot of inequities, a lot of perverse outcomes. So now is the time to foresee all that and ensure that we put all the right guardrails, the right policies, the right institutions, so that we don't lead to perverse outcomes as there are real dangers of it happening.
And it's so interesting, if I may say, with over 20 years experience across public and private sectors, where you previously led digital agriculture at, is it ICRICAT? Yes?
ICRICAT.
And co-founding the IHA platform that, mentored 20 plus AgTech startups, it's probably also a great time for you to literally restart your career, because this is a whole new force and a whole new change that is happening.
So are you asking me to join one of the startups here?
Why not? Oh, everyone, please give a round of applause to Ram Dulipala, Director, Digital Transformation Accelerator for CGIAR. And you've got a booth outside. And if any of you want to be able to interact with him to find out exactly more, please do that. Ram, thank you so much for your time. I really, truly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
All right. And don't forget your bag is at the back. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Ram. Thank you, Ram. All right. You may go. Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we stay in the same purview. We stay talking about the future of food systems, talking about the future of planetary health, encouraging, of course, for this open dialogue, because at the end of the day, what we are knowing and what we are coming to terms with is that climate change is disrupting global food systems. And of course, with increasing frequency and severity through drought, we're seeing it across the continent, through heat waves, through soil degradation, through unpredictable yields, and it's happening whether we like it or not. And that's why these professionals, these extraordinary speakers today have a lot to share. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to bring onto the stage an experienced innovation leader and operations research engineer with a strong background in supply chain optimization, digital transformation, and strategic development. He currently serves as Chief Innovation and Ambidexterity Officer at OCP Africa. Please warmly welcome Mr. Nabil Sihamou. Of course, as I said before, Chief of Innovation and Ambidexterity Officer, OCP Africa. Nabil, please take, louder round of applause, yeah. Nabil, let me turn this on for you. Wonderful. So, Nabil, let me just start off first of all from OCP Africa. Okay, I know that you are uniquely positioned at the intersection of innovation, inclusion, and impact. Why is OCP Africa's role currently crucial in this conversation on deep tech and agriculture or food systems?
Okay, so first of all, let's try by doing business in Africa. Okay. It's a little bit different than doing business in different country, in different region in the world. So sometimes we need to handle some scope outside of main scope. Like we need to go to see financial access, we need to see logistics, we need to see also education. So for that, OCP Africa is created to have a focus to the farmer, and to have really information on the ground. So for that, it's really important in OCP Africa to have this close relationship with the farmer. Now, let's say, what is the relation between technology in Africa? Yeah. If we take some statistic about the World Bank and about agriculture in Africa, we will find that we are really very, very late. And in order to bridge this gap, we could not do it normally if we are following the same way, the standard way. Sure, we will continue to be late. So the idea, we need to use the high tech much more than European, than American. Even if we use it at the same way, the gap, yes, could be reduced, but it could not be really neutralized. So for that, the only enabler that we have, and it's low cost, it's the high tech. So for that, we need to use optimally the high technology to optimize performance in the agriculture in Africa. So this is the question of why we need to use deep tech in Africa.
You know, I would never have thought about it that way. We are so far behind. If we want to catch up, our only solution is deep tech.
Exactly. I will give you an example. Even now in Africa, even if let's take the example of the World Cup in Morocco. So we don't have the best player in the world, but we have used technology to analyze how the player on the ground are playing. And given this statistic, we could reduce the gap between Moroccan team in all other international team. And if you ask our coach, he will tell you that technology has played really a critical role to reduce the gap between Morocco and other teams. It's exactly the same in agriculture.
You've given me a secret, so now I'm going to take it to the Black Stars in Ghana and tell them Morocco is winning because of technology.
Maybe, but maybe we'll switch to another technology.
Something else, we will never catch up. But it's a beautiful way of describing exactly how you catch up or how you become better than your competition, if I may put it that way.
Exactly.
You know, when I think of OCP, I'm also thinking of the significant investments in innovation ecosystems that you have made as an organization. How is your organization rethinking agricultural transformation in order to address food security challenges and perhaps even long-term planetary health?
Yes, so thanks for the question. Actually, within OCP Africa, we strongly believe that we could not manage these two topics separately and they are not competing. So we need to find solution on the same time for managing the food security and long-term planetary soil. I will give you an example. One of the key projects that we have done is to build in a solution georeferencing soil mapping. Imagine now, today, OCP Africa with our partner in OCP ecosystem, we have the information, real and statistical, about the situation of the soil of more than 54 million hectares in Africa.
Wow.
So when we did these studies with the specific tools and we get this information, we know how the nutrient in soil in Africa has been decreased. You know, what is the impact of the climate change?
Wow.
So when we know that, it's like human. When the first thing when you go to the doctor, you should do analysis in order to know which vitamin that you are missing, and when you know it, you know what you should do. So at this moment, OCP Africa and OCP ecosystem has created very customized solution in order to cover all nutriment that is missed and impacted from climate change. That is the power of technology. Do you imagine? This solution has been done by both on the ground, but we could not cover 54 million hectares on the ground, but with sample and right sample and using a georeference statistical forecast, we could cover all this area, and we have really created a very specific customized solution. So at the end, I would like to highlight one point, it's important. Usually we heard customized product, customized portfolio in order to increase sales. But in this situation, the main challenge, it was not really yes, sure, we have the ambition to increase sales, etc. But when we customize our product, we find the right fertilizer, we give in the right nutriment to different soil in the region. Let's take an example of Nigeria. Just for one country, we have created more than 14 customized solution. So this is the mindset of OCP Africa. Sure, we could not change the climate change, unfortunately, because we hope that, but at least we could mitigate the impact. We could secure much more food security. So in this mindset, we are working on OCP Africa with our partner in the ecosystem and also outside the ecosystem.
So Nabil, hang on a second. I'm really enjoying this lesson.
Thank you. Me also. Thank you.
I'm enjoying this lesson, and I just want you to clarify something for me. You have a choice to solve climate change, or you have a choice to solve what climate change will impact by understanding what the different needs of these soil, as you said, the soils are. So then by giving the soil the necessary nutrients to combat the impact of climate.
Exactly.
I'm a good
Exactly.
student. I'm a good
You are-
student. I'm perfect. No, but I like this because then what you are also saying is no matter where you go in Africa, once you're able to identify the soil that you have in your database, you are also able to recommend. Is that what you'll be able to do?
Exactly, exactly. Just one point, we could
me.
not reduce the effect 100%, but at least we reduce the impact. We know, for example, let's take a Moroccan that he goes to live in Europe, and he doesn't face a lot of sun.
Yeah.
So if he spends 1 year, 2 years, he will find that he is missing vitamin D.
Right.
So if he doesn't take the vitamin D enough, so his health, it will not be good.
Yeah.
So it's exactly, the climate change impacts the soil in terms of nutrients, in terms of acidity. So if we didn't do right action, so the soil, it will
Yeah.
not be in good health for the present and also for the future. That's what you said exactly. Once we know the situation of the soil in different regions, in OCP Africa, in OCP ecosystem, we are developing customized solution. That's something we are really doing it very well, and our roadmap in all the OCP group will go again much more further in this orientation.
I truly appreciate it. Nabil, you had said earlier on that rather than deal with all the problems at the same time, you separated it, right? You separated food security challenges from long-term planetary health. Is that what you had said?
So actually, we are saying that we are creating both.
Yeah.
Because when we are improving the health, soil health, we are also increasing the yield.
Yeah.
And it means when we, actually, I will give you just some statistics. With this customized solution, many times we increase the yield by 20%.
Wow.
So it means for the same surface, we are producing much more 20%. So it's contribute in food security. So this customized solution is solve in parallel both problems.
Yes.
Mitigate the impact of the climate change and also increasing food security.
Beautiful. So in your role as Chief of Innovation and Ambidexterity, how do you balance building solutions for today's farmers while investing in the next generation technologies, of course, AI, biotech, and any advancements that you can talk about?
Sure. I think we are in the group of OCP, and now our DNA, it's much more boosted in terms of this ambidexterity intuition. All time, we need to fix the present, and we need to look on the futures. Yes. So what we are given OCP Africa, it has in this way several years ago, even in the beginning, because doing business in Africa, it requires to go outside of your business scope. For example, you need to go to education sometime. You need to go outside to go to financial access. You go really outside business. Someone who